This is the Julius Collins and Sean Barnard Show with my friend
Julius Collins.
And I'm Sean Barnard.
How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
It's been quite the eventful week. I'm great, though. Thanks. Nice to see you again.
It has been a crazy week. It's one of those crazy yin-yang weeks where I've had extreme highs and some pretty tough lows. And
what do you, anything you want to share with the kids?
Nope.
No, I didn't figure that.
No, it's just one of those things that you have those days sometimes where you're like, you hit a low with something going on in the family or some friends or something like that, and then you have another day where it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. And there's always, that's just kind of the way life rolls.
There's no doubt about it. It's great to have an outlet to be able to kind of work through some of that stuff and maybe get some answers.
You never know what's coming up next, so you got to stick around for the next day. So we want to talk about a few different things that kind of struck us this week. A few things: the Little League World Series championship title revoked, taken away to the Chicago team that was assembled there. We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about Jon Stewart leaving the Daily Show somewhat.
We shall miss him.
Unexpectedly. Yeah, we shall miss him. And kind of what do we do next? Where do progressives go? And I want to talk a little bit about it's very interesting that format and how it worked, and I think how it influenced politics. We'll talk a little bit about our friend Paul Mercurio, who was an Emmy Award-winning writer for The Daily Show for a couple of years, also won a Peabody. He also has written for Stephen Colbert. He's joined the Alive and Social
brilliant.
Network. Yeah, he's hilarious.
It's fantastic.
Really good guy. And then it's the 40th anniversary of Saturday Night Live.
SNL.
Yep, that's tonight, which is Sunday. And if you're listening to the recorded version, it may not be tonight. But you can always get it on demand, right? And then we want to talk a little bit about our music influences. I mean, just what affected us musically growing up, where we're at now, some stuff that we like, and tie into that passion as well.
I like it.
So this is the Alive and Social Network. You can listen to a lot of the different shows on the Alive and Social Network. Paul Mercurio just joined us. Paul, again, you can go to his site, paulmercurio.com. We've actually just loaded everything onto our Spreaker account. So if you go to Spreaker on your Android or iPhone or on the web, look up Alive and Social, and you can look at the list of all of our shows on Spreaker. And so Paul Mercurio has interviewed people like Stephen Colbert, like Paul McCartney, like Jay Leno, a lot of comedians and actors and writers and authors and that sort of thing. But Paul's just got a fantastic interview style. Gets very real with people on his show, and he's the first one to ever get Paul McCartney to do a podcast.
Wow,
which is pretty cool. So we'll talk about that as well. So the first things first, let's talk a little bit about this situation with the Little League World Series. One of the things that struck me is a good friend of mine from high school, a gentleman by the name of Marlon Jones. We were hoping to get him on the phone today, but he's working in the Bakken oil fields right now, and he could not sneak away to get some phone time with us.
Emphasis on working.
Oh, he is working, and it's so funny because he and I met in the 8th grade. I told you the story that he was singing a little bit of Rapper's Delight, and I took over the next verse, sitting next to him in class, and I was about, 8th grade, I was probably about 5'2", and he was about 6'3" at that point.
Jeez. Mutt and Jeff.
Oh, it was just hilarious.
Rapper's Delight.
And we became friends very quickly at that point. He ended up being the star of our basketball team, and I ended up being the star of nothing. No, maybe the star of the ladies.
I don't know. You're a star of the Julius Collins and Sean Bernard show. That's the Sean Bernard show.
I think we got...
If I can only say your name.
We got equal props.
Star of the bit.
But a good friend of mine, and he ended up, doing speech and debate with me later on and contributed that way, but just a great friend still to this day. And he posted an article written by Andrew McCutcheon, who plays for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Yeah, and he talks all about his opinion on what happened, and the name of the article is actually left out. But he talks all about the socioeconomic side of this, and, he doesn't lean really on the, black kids. He leans more on the socioeconomic side, but I think it's maybe a mix of both in this situation with Chicago, that he talks about the fact that, well, look, here's some kids who never would have even had a chance had they not, bended the rules a little bit. Had they followed the letter of the law, they never would have been on that stage. And he talks about his own story playing football and baseball, and he lived in an area where he never would have been seen where he was at. And so he really went to the side of, when it comes to kids that are poor or disadvantaged in any way, they should get the opportunity. And sometimes you may have to bend the rules to be able to give these kids an opportunity to to be seen.
Yeah, well, this is interesting, and frankly, Minnesota the Twins had a player, Torrey Hunter, who kind of had a similar stance on this. This is about opportunity, and I agree with elements of this article. I think it's really relevant, particularly when you look at the decline of African Americans, because in some of these South American countries that are impoverished, a lot of these players are coming over and doing quite well, but for whatever reason, especially in communities that are predominantly black, those avenues aren't there anymore. There were baseball diamonds around, when I was a kid, and there were T-shirt leagues and things like that. I wasn't a big baseball guy, but I'd go out in the yard and hit the ball around. I don't know that there's a lot of that going on anymore, and frankly, some of that is access. I just disagree fundamentally on the idea that it's just about opportunity, because in the end, if this is really about the kids, then we should emphasize the value in following the rules as they are stated, whether they are unfair or not. To circumvent them or circumnavigate them in any way, however you decide to label it, it still does a disservice to the kids, because number one, I wonder what it must have been like for. Let me just preface this by saying I really loved the optics of seeing these kids win. And how they did it. They were classy. They did a really good job. They won. But they, in the end, they didn't earn it in a fair way. And I blame the adults in this situation. I wonder what must be going through some of the kids' minds that knew that they were. Or maybe they just, this is this is about redistricting. Easy for me to say. So I'm not sure how aware the kids are of that, or where they might be located as it relates to what's legal and what's not. But I'm certain that some adults should have known, and that's where my issues. That's where I have a problem. And how could you run these kids out there knowing that you're cheating, and you're cheating them out of an experience that they'll never get it back.
No, and the adults had to know. And in one case, it's kind of odd. In one of the cases, the kid lived across the street from where the district was.
That's where it gets really unfortunate.
It does. Well, and so the other side of the coin could be that people will say, okay, these kids, most of them came from poverty, right? And so they kind of, the only way they're going to get this exposure is if they cheat and get into the district. Because the other side of it, the flip side of it is, well, these kids that are in the wealthy areas, their families will just move to that area.
Yeah, they can legally cheat, and this is a good lesson for life. Frankly, unfortunately for these kids, there are people who can circumvent the rules, and it's seen as being creative, or you have the resources to do these things. And I think it's important to note that the gentleman that turned these kids in, or turned this team in, I think they lost to him something along the lines of 45-3. And so we're talking maybe an 8-mile distance from each other, and economically, socioeconomically speaking, those are very different areas from what I understand. And there's another thing that I understand, that they've also been caught cheating. So I just think it's ironic that the guy turned these guys in for cheating was also found to have done his own little bit of cheating. So we're talking about degrees in some ways, but we're also talking about fundamentally right from wrong, and how do we, there have to be solutions about this, because the idea that a kid can live across the street and not be allowed on the same team as the kid living directly across the street from him is just bizarre.
Well, yeah, but a border's a border. I mean, to me, at some point, you got to make the decision, because then what about the kid who lives just a block behind that kid, who grew up with him, goes to the same school, everything else, but that's the way the boundary is drawn. At some point, what I go to is, what about the kids who didn't cheat? What about the kids who did, play the right way, or the parents that were involved that said, no, that's not right, I can't let my kid do that? Or it's been discovered before in the Little League World Series that there's kids that are older than they should be.
Yeah, we should mention that this is not unprecedented. Foul play in the Little League World Series seems to be. I mean, the Taiwanese team seems to have a situation every 4 or 5 years where there's a kid who's 2 years older than he's supposed to be. I mean, it's not unprecedented, but it's just unfortunate.
No, it is. It is unfortunate. I mean, it's unfortunate for the kids who do play fair, and that's where I get conflicted with it. Is that can you really regulate either side of this? What I mean is, from the wealthy standpoint, you can always move to your area that you want to move to, or what happens in many states like here is that a lot of the really wealthy kids just go to private schools and they stack the teams that way, and then from a poverty standpoint, is it, that the kids sneak into a district or jump on a team that they shouldn't have been on? And really, ultimately, as we talked about earlier, isn't this really just about kids having fun, learning how to play on a team, learning some structure and discipline, learning to be coached and what that means to be coachable, and so many valuable things that will apply to them for the rest of their lives? Yeah,
but sports at its core is a very achievement-based kind of scenario.
It is.
And it's easy to kind of get swept away with the idea of moving up and moving to higher competition, moving to better opportunity for, it's about how you're wired also. That's why I just think parents are really crucial in all of this, because I'm thinking about, what would happen if my son was on the other side of that line. I'd just be like, I'm sorry, I'm not willing to risk that, because I just think it wouldn't be worth it for you and or me, the shame that would go along with having you found out about it. But again, people process stuff differently, and this is one of those things clearly that people rationalized to suit themselves, and that is very human.
Well, it's a tough thing, and we've talked about, how long has this sort of thing gone on? When I was in high school, my junior year, we happened to have two, I think they were 250 to 300-pound Texas boys join the team.
That's some serendipity there.
Yeah, it was pretty miraculous that they happened to show up in Mesa, Arizona, and happened to go to our school, and we happened to win the state championship.
It's a natural stop-off from Texas.
Yeah, we ended up having two kids play in the NFL, Toby and T.C. Wright. They played in the NFL at some point, but not without those offensive linemen would that have happened. And then the local newspaper did a quick article that they felt like several of our kids were on steroids. And I look at that, and I was not the athlete that was going to be, at the level of being able to play. I went to a huge school, 3,300 kids. If you were not big and great early, you weren't playing.
It was over,
yeah, you weren't playing on the team. But boy, did it ever become unfair when some kids that I saw that were pretty slim the year before suddenly were up 20, 25 pounds of all muscle and had every sign of doing roids as possible,
I feel like I keep reverting back to this, but I have to ask, where, so your son, do you just assume that he's just working so hard that he's blowing up, and you kind of gloss over it if you're a parent? But, the health, the dangers are astronomical, and the idea that you'd be willing to do that because you're thinking, my kid's going to make it big one day, and I don't want to, cut his chances of making it happen. But it is inherently unfair to shift the playing field like that.
Well, and some of the parents knew,
of course,
and some of the parents didn't. Some of the parents were probably oblivious.
And I have issues with both of those things.
I do too, because there's the parents that drop their kids off at sports and they use it as a babysitter, and they don't even go to the games, and then there's the parents that are so into it that they're sending their kid to every camp and every single thing, and if Johnny doesn't make it to that next level, it makes them look like a worse parent.
Because they're living vicariously. You see so much of that.
That's what I mean. So, it's a tough thing. I got a kid that plays two sports. He plays basketball. He plays baseball. Those are really his two big sports. But he loves to play. He's a kid who loves to practice, loves to play. But I won't go into details, but we've already experienced so much with situations where I know kids are not in the right age limit and they're playing against his teams, or there's issues with coaches and what they say and do and their impact on the game. We've run into some political situations already where we knew my kid was kind of pushed to a different direction.
And your last name?
Well, no, I'm not going to. Yeah, my last name probably doesn't help me. But I am the guy that will stand up if I see an injustice happening. That's just kind of the way I was raised and how I'm built. And if I see a kid being mistreated, I'm going to say something about it. We've also been blessed with some great coaches along the way. And I coached myself. I coached my son's teams when in the early years before it got too crazy. And it's a zoo, depending on what kind of parents you're dealing with and the kind of kids that you're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I coached youth football for 3 years, and right up through the time of my son was going to high school. And I really enjoyed working with the kids. It was, I mean, I've volunteered in different incarnations over the years, and this was just something that I thought was kind of a win-win. Sometimes volunteering can be a little bit laborious and stressful because you realize that you're dealing with people who are disadvantaged in many ways, and it can be really just a stressful deal. Getting them to show up, even just getting them to show up. But football is, kids love football. They love to throw it around and catch it. And so it was just kind of a way to kind of reach them. But for us, we were never a good team. But I just thought the lessons were so awesome. Even in losing, there were just so many great lessons. My son, I watched him really mature as an individual because of being the coach's son and not being, at least initially, not being a good player and watching kids go after him.
Yeah.
I had to learn how to process that as a coach and not as a father. But the experience is unbelievable. But I have to tell you, the adults, for the lack of a better word, can really be the worst part of that whole thing. It was ultimately what ran me out of it. I was like, I can't deal with you people anymore. This is making me nutty. But the either lack of involvement. And you're not holding the kids accountable, so they're not learning valuable lessons like that at home. Or you're so over involved until you're yelling insults at kids from the stands. I mean, these are supposed to be adults, and the behavior is astonishing. But again, we're in a win-based culture, and professional athletes are doing all sorts of things, and these kids are mimicking them. And the adults are looking at the bottom line, which for them is monetary.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. There's so many different ways we could go with this. One other thing that has struck me is there are the parents that every kid deserves a trophy too. And I don't. Once you get to if you're playing rec league ball, great, everybody gets a trophy. But if you choose to play competitive ball, to me, then I'm like, now not every kid gets a trophy.
I'm not. Listen, I've been known to savage soccer from time to time because and hockey for that matter, with all due respect to our hockey and soccer parents. But the idea of a tie just makes me want to, I don't know. It just as a former athlete, and I guess if you're ever an athlete, you're always an athlete.
Yeah.
Just my mentality is, it's okay to lose. It really is not the worst thing in the world. In fact, it can be some really good things. Humility can be a really helpful tool as you go through life, and if you just are like designing ways to not feel it, then my God, what are we doing?
Oh, you have to you have to be able to learn from your mistakes, which is going to happen. You have to be coachable. Being coachable as a kid is something you have to learn because nobody likes criticism, and a great coach that's able to use constructive criticism and really show you what to do next. Like, hey, that didn't quite work out the way we planned, but part of the problem was you weren't switching in the post down there. Yeah. You weren't doing what we did in practice, and that's what I need you to do. You need to listen to me and do what I say, and then you're probably going to see some better results. And kids need to hear that from another adult besides their parents.
No, I don't think there's any doubt about it. Coaches and teachers can really be instrumental in driving home really valuable lessons, hopefully, that parents are kind of initiating. I mean, you can be a hand-in-hand experience, and there's so many amazing teachers and coaches out there who do just that, who kind of like get you on that path for success. And success obviously is relative, but the idea that you would have a chance at viewing yourself as success, it makes you a success. And I think really good coaches kind of like, they use all that sports stuff as a way to kind of reinforce life lessons. I think those are the people that are really special because it takes something to put yourself out there as a coach.
And you and I have both had great coaches and great teachers. In an upcoming episode, we're actually going to try to get a hold.
I'm looking forward to that episode, maybe the most of all, because I think it's going to be very cool.
We're going to try to get a hold of some of these former teachers and coaches that influenced us at some point in our life or saved us in some cases.
Because you people are freaking amazing.
Yeah. For me, there were a few different people. I'll name them now. We'll try to get them on the phone at some point. But
we're naming names now.
Yeah. Rick DeLargo was a teacher of mine in junior high, and then he came over to my high school. Mel Olson, our speech and debate coach and dramatic, acting teacher.
Wow.
And then earlier on, when I was in third grade, Margaret Wheaton, Peggy Wheaton, here in Minneapolis. Actually, she was in Richfield, but just an incredible human being. Hoping to get those folks on the phone. Who do you have? Who are some of the names from the past that
Well, listen, mine are mostly music teachers because I was mostly terrible in all my other classes. But there's one in particular, and she still, to this day, and this is my third grade music teacher, to this day, she comes and watches me, and whether I'm doing a play or she'll come to the caboose and watch Greasy Meal or Bunkers and see the combo. She's amazing. Her name is Miss Western, and she really was the person who kind of is, I would say, most instrumental in making me feel good about myself. I mean, I felt like she saw something in me that I had no idea about. But Miss Western, Miss McCabe was, she was the keyboard player in my first band, JC and the Bridgeway Band.
Yeah.
Miss Reckemer was my high school music teacher. But music teachers, I don't know, I have a soft spot for them because that's another tool to get to kids.
And regardless of your upbringing, parents, your parental situation, whatever it happens to be, sometimes just hearing from another person that they believe in you, that they see your talent, that they will challenge you in some way. Sometimes you need to hear it from somebody else.
Well, I just think it goes a long ways. I mean, it's one thing to be, and listen, even if you have a positive kind of reinforcement situation in the home, I think to leave that situation and have that reinforced again isn't the worst thing in the world. We do enough to denigrate each other and tear each other down. It's a beautiful thing, and I think it goes a long ways when we reinforce the positive things about each other. I live for that.
Absolutely. So we're going to try to get in touch with some of those former teachers and coaches and people that were major influences in our life. We have a few other things we want to get to today. One is the retirement announcement of Jon Stewart from The Daily Show.
Cue the weeping.
Yeah, it's one of those things that as a progressive guy myself, who's voted mostly Democrat in my life, I'm nervous about it because I think he had satire and being a lefty have gone together fairly well. It's actually known, it was brought up on Meet the Press today, that for some reason conservative talk radio has done very well. It always has. Liberal talk radio has never done very well. It just does not go hand in hand. It hasn't done well in the ratings. But satire and the lefty side, such as The Daily Show or Saturday Night Live, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and some of the things that they've done, have done very well. And so Jon Stewart had a great way of articulating some great points, calling out the absurd when it came, especially to me, when it came to things that were conservative or unfair to the masses. He had a great way with his staff of writers of illustrating some things and convincing people to vote one way or another based on issues that he was able to clearly demonstrate, a positive or a negative to that particular issue.
Well, I love Jon Stewart, and obviously one of the things about laughter and humor is it allows us to kind of work through, issues, and sometimes it allows us to work through anger. And so in my mind, I think, obviously this is just my opinion, but a lot of right-wing radio is predicated on anger, and it's not the most difficult thing in the world to get people aroused in fear-based scenarios. And so I think Jon Stewart found a natural way to make humor the conduit for talking about tough issues and getting out things that just are infuriating about some of the things that you hear from the right. Now, I'm clearly a progressive individual in the way that I have voted, in the way that I think. I don't in any way want to diminish the value of having a conservative nature about you, because I like to think that I have a conservative nature about me. It just, when it comes to things, major issues, I tend to lean to the left. But I think Jon Stewart was a resource for people like me who at times just didn't know how to deal with our stuff, and he'd point out the absurdity in some of the things that would bug us as lefties, and I think it was just really therapeutic.
Oh, it really was. I mean, it brought laughter to it. Sometimes, in some cases, he got pissed on his own show. It wasn't supposed to be funny. He got really, really upset about particular topics.
Which is what made him so authentic. It wasn't just him reading from the teleprompter. He was really, he delivered the bit, and then sometimes you'd get a taste of where he really was at.
I'm one of these people that, when it comes to conservative or progressive, I like some of the ideas of conservatives, but I just think that there's just no chance they're going to happen. This idea that we don't need taxes because we're just going to take care of each other. That's a really nice idea. I like that idea. I just don't think there's no fucking way it's going to happen.
Well, of course not, but it's all in my mind, again, that's predicated on I have mine, so you get yours. And if you don't have yours, then whose fault is that? And I just think that's a really lazy way to kind of approach humanity.
Well, if you get a bingo card and you just fill it up with me, myself, and I and the word taxes and listen to a conservative talk radio, you're going to hear me, myself, and I. It's my money. It's my this. I'm that. My family. Well, your family's great, but you know what? You're as only good as your next door neighbor, as your community, as your city, as your state, as your government, as this world. I mean, if you do not look at society, I love the 100 people analogy, and people, it just annoys the hell out of a lot of conservatives. But that if this world was just 100 people, there's no way we would allow for this small percentage of people to have all the wealth.
Yeah.
For it to be that unfair, that you could watch that many of the children of that society of 100 people, 1 in 5 of those kids to be in poverty. There's no way you would allow it if it was only 100 people in this world.
Well, again, you're talking about the narrative that surrounds being impoverished, and that is part and parcel what allows that to kind of continue. It's just, that if people shut off their brains on this whole thing and they just think of it in terms of, this person is an achiever and this person is an underachiever. If it's that simple to you, then we've already lost. But there's so much more like nuance in there. There's so much circumstance and happenstance. There's so much of what you were born into, and so much what there are a lot of elements there, and we really, I mean, it's a subject, and that requires just a little bit of drilling down.
Well, and that's what Jon Stewart did so well. I mean, there's nothing that annoys me more than somebody who came from poverty, has achieved wealth, and they think they did it all by themselves, and that it wasn't, hey, I always admire work ethic. I hope I show a good amount of work ethic in my life.
You work pretty hard.
Yeah, but I'd be kidding myself if I were to say that I didn't have people in my family, my friends, whoever it was, my friends' parents, that didn't have an influence on me. It is about who you know as well as what you know.
Networking is a big part of getting ahead, if you will.
And so if you live in the ghetto, you're surrounded by people in the ghetto, you don't know 50 people that have great jobs that can influence you, that can help pull you out of whatever it is you do. Even if you're willing to do the work,
right,
you don't necessarily know that. And so that is where the disconnect is. And again, I kind of understand people that are blue bloods and that they have their money and their money's gone 10 generations deep, and they've never, they don't really relate to poor people. But there's nothing more disgusting to me than somebody that came from poverty and that they're so self-righteous that they believe it was just them that lifted themselves out of it and got them to this higher ground.
Well, what is it about us as a people? And I say us because I think on some level we are all capable of the best and the worst, just by function of being the human species. But what is it about, and particularly Americans, that has this kind of, I just feel like we're such a status-based country until
classist.
People love the idea of having something that others don't. I mean, it just kind of feels good.
Celebrity worship.
I have mine, and what are you doing?
It's about values. I mean, it's interesting because I grew up with a mother who was very hippie-ish, and to her credit, she's still that way. Not that she didn't have her own issues and challenges and everything else, but her value system is very much the same. But where have all these people gone? Where have all the people gone? And what happened with their children? So even if you went from hippie to yuppie and you did all that stuff, but really your values aren't the same? What the hell happened to all these people that were marchers? What happened to all the people that were going down the street? Did they not teach their kids the same value? Or did they decide to get comfortable?
Well, what happens when people, let's just say like through their most progressive years, what do they say, during the collegiate years, you are most malleable?
Yep.
So what happens during the course of the next 30 years that causes that really optimistic, hopeful, positive individual turns into I shouldn't say I'm making this up. They went from this beautiful creature into this horrible. But I mean, it happens, right? I mean, people go from being Democrats to Republicans. Is this just an issues based? And suddenly they don't feel the same way on those issues. What happens? Do people go cold?
I had somebody say to me when I was 25 years old, they said, "You will be a Republican by the time you're 35." And I said, "Why?" They said, "Because you'll have a family, you'll have a higher tax base, you'll not want to pay those taxes." And they kept rolling it through me, and I just kept looking at them going, nope, nope, nope. And hey, I have friends who are Republicans. I have friends that I care about that I love that are Republicans. I'm not bashing them. I'm just saying, don't tell me what I'm going to do. Don't tell me what I'm going to believe in, and don't tell me that I will quit caring about people that are less fortunate, or don't tell me that I'll be righteous about who I am or where I am at some point in my life, because if you really believe that, you don't really know me.
I will say again, conservatives, as it relates to economics, as it relates to the overreach of government, I think I feel like we have common ground there. You know what I mean? I think when I hear some of the things that come out of conservatives that scare me, they are generally, they're double standards, like Second Amendment double standards, like the brother carrying the assault rifle who was it's like it's okay for me to have a Second Amendment, but I don't necessarily want you carrying guns around. So it's the hypocrisy related to those sort of things. If you love guns, fine, but then you should really want everyone to have that right, and it shouldn't be one of those things where there's a double standard and you guys can march around with your assault rifles and we shouldn't be alarmed, but the minute you see somebody with a little bit more melanin in their skin, suddenly there's a crime afoot. I just think those sort of things, you lose me on those one. I'm looking for common ground because I think in the end that's how we get ahead. I'm hoping
it is
to find ways to connect as opposed to finding ways to disconnect. I want to be a part of the solution.
So how might that happen? The hope is, that this next generation coming up, which I think is a more open, accepting, inclusive generation.
You mean until they're not?
Until they're not. Well, the hope is,
if you listen to some,
the hope is that you have more that stay than don't. But the only way that happens sometimes is if it gets really bad, and that it's true. It's that a lot of times. No form of government has lasted more than 300 years. It's very interesting with democracy or whatever we are nowadays, our oligarchy that we have. I'm hopeful to a certain degree that this next generation coming up will understand how to communicate, how to assemble, and that might be with social media versus marching.
I feel like in some ways they're doing it better than we did.
Yeah,
I feel like there's more impetus to do it. More so than ever, and it could very well be a function of the fact that things have, in some ways, gotten really prickly and terse in some cases. So I encourage involvement. I think it's where we meet in the middle, and I think that I have a lot of confidence in the next couple of generations of kids because they seem to be. I think it's easy to say that people are lost in their electrical devices, and I suppose that's understandable. I am to some degree, but I really do feel like there is a cognizant collection of people who really want to fight the good fight, and I think the good fight just means spreading love, spreading togetherness, working as a team to kind of make this a better place for us to be. I don't mean to be too simplistic, but I do think that these are simple things that we can accomplish.
Well, I do think that our generation and, I think this generation that's coming up next, we are less hateful of people around the world because we know people around the world through social media and we're more connected than we used to be. So there is a positive change from that degree, that we know that somebody on Facebook who's in Ireland or in Norway or wherever else. I have friends.
Shout out to our fans in Norway. What up, y'all?
Yeah. Please share the show if you can in Oslo. Nice. But it's interesting getting back to the Daily Show just for a second. We'll wrap with this, but Jon Stewart is an incredibly intelligent guy with a incredible sense of humor. He was also the main editor of that show. He was really the guy leading that show all around. And so I'll just tell you that in my opinion, I think they need to end the show and call it something else.
Well, I'm wondering what's going to happen. Calling it the Daily Show. Obviously that's the name of the show, and so it'll be interesting to see who they attempt to bring in there. But Jon Stewart was listen. The funny thing is, I wasn't a big Jon Stewart fan prior to this show, but I liked him. I thought he was clever and a little bit witty and a little bit irreverent. But the show like really sussed him out as a really serious journalist in a way who just happened to be a comedian.
You just can't win. Whoever's in there next, and there's talk about Amy Poehler, some other people. I just think rename the show for somebody else's, whatever you want to call it. Rename the show and give somebody a chance at a fresh start with something rather than trying to be the next Jon Stewart.
Well, I certainly wish him well, but
absolutely,
it's going to be a tough chair, man, to fill.
Absolutely. So a couple of other things on our mind. So Paul Mercurio, Emmy Award-winning writer for that show, I got a chance to talk to him a little bit, and he still warms up the crowd there a couple times a week, and he's just kind of blown away by the whole thing. He saw it coming, and Jon Stewart said, I really just want to be able to spend some time with my family and eat dinner with them and have some normalcy to my life.
I was going to say, imagine being Jon Stewart for a second. And I imagine when you did that initially, you thought this would be a good avenue to kind of get real news to the masses in a way that they can digest it. Over time, though, I'm sure he had to realize the magnitude of what he was doing and how crucial he is to the whole situation, the whole scenario that we find ourselves in. He was just amazing and an integral cog. So, but the pressure must have been immense. And what happens with I think we talked a little bit about this. Your family, on some level, I think they suffer because you become so focused on how important it is to do the work that. He's doing amazingly important work, all guised as a 30-minute comedy bit.
Yeah, we talked about that in the car. Is that suddenly this show that you committed to, whatever it was, 15 years ago, that you thought would be a fun deal to do and might do okay in the ratings and everything else.
Let's ruffle some feathers. I think that was part of the irreverence. Was what they were like. Wow, they're going to let us get away with this.
And through the course of time and through some political elections, you realize that you are, in many ways, the voice of a generation and the voice of a political party,
so.
And you feel then a duty to keep doing your job. But I give him credit right now for walking away for the betterment of his family, and hopefully he can find something that gives him a little bit more balance in his life.
Well, he wasn't going to be able to do it forever, and I think he picked a really good time to walk away. His guy Colbert had moved on. I think it's on to the next important thing for him, and maybe it's just about being himself and doing nothing.
And hopefully for progressives, there's something else that comes along that people will look to that will really help them understand the issues.
Well, that's just it. I'm hoping that we find a way to remain invested and find avenues to do it, whatever it is, and because I think more than ever people count on you not paying attention. I think we just have to stay involved. We have to vote. We have to read. We have to research. We just have to suss out, and frankly, we have to look for different ways to get our information so that we can kind of cross-check it and cross-reference it. So, because in the end, it's facts and truth that we're after and the betterment for people.
It's never been easier to do so because of social media, because of the internet, because of things like Comedy Central. There was a time and a place when you wanted to do your research on a candidate, you're going to the library, you were going to the newspaper and hoping that they weren't incredibly biased or somebody wasn't lining their pockets, trying to buy them off. And so it's never been easier to do your homework about your favorite candidate, whatever side you're on. Do your homework, know what you're voting for before you color in that little, oval on the page. So let's talk a little bit about Saturday Night Live. It is the 40th anniversary, which makes me feel a little bit old. I don't know about you.
Not me.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. I remember being on the bus, doing the Mr. Bill. Oh, no, it's Mr. Bill.
Wow.
Remember that bit?
I remember Gumby Dammit.
Oh, yeah. I'm Gumby Dammit. That was such a great bit. You look at that. Eddie Murphy was 18 when he auditioned for that show.
Yeah,
18.
You think about the list of luminaries who came through there, man. It's just ridiculous. Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase. It's just...
And some of the guests that came through there and just did a stellar job.
Well, that show was like three-dimensional in that way. They were able to kind of serve the kind of music gods, and they were able to serve the the laughter gods, but then they were able to get political at times too, and really kind of do the thing that I think that was kind of precursor for Jon Stewart. I mean, that Saturday Night Live was really cutting edge and some. I mean, we were talking about the Richard Pryor,
the
Steve Martin bit was Chevy Chase bit.
Yep.
And it's just, you're right. I doubt very seriously that you could do that bit. And think about it, how racy things have gotten, and yet that bit becomes less doable as we move along. How is that?
It's crazy that we've gone backwards in many ways as far as what we're willing to put out there.
I mean, that was a really frontal, derogatory term after derogatory term bit that was so profound in the way it just put it all out there, and so that people could just see how absurd the whole thing is.
It had that Lenny Bruce vibe, and I think to actually put that on national TV live made people really, really uncomfortable, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
What do these words mean? How do they affect us? How do we feel about them? And they really just try to play off the fact that these are words. They can have impact. They can have meaning. But I just thought it was remarkable that they would do that then, and there's no way in hell they could do that now.
I love how the slow seethe would come, and all of a sudden it was just two irate dudes.
I know the way they were looking at each other, and it's like you could just see the blood pressure going up. It was just brutal. So I'm looking forward to that tonight. They're going to have a bunch of the old characters on there.
Would you say George Carlin was the very first
he was
host
the first
of the show?
Yep, he was
Think
the
about
first
that.
guest host. Oh, man, and he was just
Who do we get
stellar.
to kick this bad boy off? Let's get Carlin. He'll say some dirty words.
Oh, he wasn't afraid.
No.
He was not afraid
That
to
dude
say
was
what he
fantastic.
thought. I know, he really was.
Carlin and Pryor, man. I mean, you can't go wrong with those two.
Yeah, Pryor was another guy, but the parallels, I mean, the oddness in his life that he did that bit on SNL, yet he wrote most of Blazing Saddles and didn't get credit. Isn't that odd? Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm giving you this look. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
How's that possible?
It's.
I shouldn't say how is that possible, but how is that possible?
But no, that's part of that's what's odd about it. It's like, okay, on the one hand, we can do this bit on national TV, but on the other hand, I write a good chunk of Blazing Saddles and a lot of the laugh lines in there, but I don't get credit for it. I mean, it's just it's disgusting in many ways that's the way it happened, and that.
No, you say he doesn't
ago.
get credit. He doesn't get credit as in writers.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding.
I thought you meant doesn't get credit as in he doesn't get credit for being able to be a straight writer.
No, he didn't get credit. Like he credits. Like he didn't.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's pathetic.
I would say not unprecedented.
No, and that was Hollywood at the time, as liberal as Hollywood has called it many times. It's like, well, wait a second. You know what I mean? It's like, well, but then again, we're not willing to give Richard Pryor credit where credit is due, which is a little brutal. So, the SNL thing with music, which I think will go great into our next segment here, but I can't tell you how many bands I've stayed up for, even when SNL was struggling with some of the comedy, which some of their bits that should be 2 minutes long.
Unbelievable.
Oh my God! Even in the early years, there were some bits where it was like, I think that bit should have been about 30 seconds, and you made it 5 minutes to try to fill time. Where it was just they were struggling through it, but you'd wait to hear the band play because the band usually play 2 times. And there was no MTV back in the day.
Which came first? That show, was it Midnight Special with all the bands on it? Remember that?
Midnight Special.
Did that precede Saturday Night Live?
Well, Saturday Night Live was 75, and so I think Midnight Special was
like 71.
Was it then? Okay.
I want to say, I'm not sure. Saturday Night Live, the whole music segment seemed like kind of like an extension of that because they were really good at bringing in quality music acts.
Oh, so cool.
And it was just like getting a free concert at the crib.
Now, the crazy thing is on the very first episode, they went with somebody who I thought was incredibly talented, but, not the most uplifting, upbeat song of all time. Janice Ian did the song At 17.
That is such a depressing
That's what I mean.
song.
It's like, you're sitting there.
But it was such, that was the time, man. You're coming out of the late 60s. It was just so apropos for the bit.
That melancholy vibe going on.
One really depressing song.
They had the soft lighting going and Janice Ian saying that ugly duckling girls like me. Wow. People would walk by and mutter vague.
It breaks my heart. I'm not sure which song is sadder, that one or Alone Again by Gilbert O'Sullivan.
Oh my God, it's
Naturally.
just brutal. But so yeah, you gotta watch that first episode when you get a chance because it's totally different than they kind of got to at some point with SNL. But
I just can't imagine how difficult it would have been over time to just do live skit after live skit as we sit here doing radio. I just think that would have been. How do you manage that when a bit's going bad and you still got 3 more minutes of the bit to fill?
Oh, and there are times where you could tell that's what they were doing. They were looking at the clock going, oh, get me out of this bit.
And they went through almost decade-long droughts of bad bits, but man, did they have some amazing stuff come through there. Even when I was sneaking up to go watch the shows when I was little, it was still like, wow.
It'll be fun to watch part of it tonight and then record the rest because I'm going to see the combo tonight.
What?
Yeah.
I started to think you had some kind of aversion and coming to hang out with your boy.
I wanted to give you a couple. Honestly, here's my thing.
Get my sea legs?
I thought, you know what? Not like you couldn't do this in your sleep, but I wanted to get you, have you get your groove going with them again.
Look at you.
Get back in, and then I'll go in.
Look at you thinking about me.
And plus, it's going to take you a little while to be able to sing properly when you see me dance.
I can't. I will have my phone handy just for the Alive and Social Network.
Yeah, Juice is in Dr. Mambo's combo again every Sunday and Monday night at Bunkers in downtown Minneapolis. It's a quick train ride, bus ride, car ride.
Warehouse District, baby.
Yeah,
fabulous.
So easy to get down there. I was there Friday night for R Factor and got a chance to swing my wife around the dance floor for a couple of hours. It was just such a cool vibe down there. And
it's just a great, for a dive bar, it's got, number one, it's got a lot of charm. It's very clean. But there's just so much history in that place. It's just been such a major contributor to the music scene here in the Twin Cities. And as you know, if you've ever been out of the Twin Cities, it's quite the famous music scene. It's just a beautiful thing to be able to be back down with the combo on Sundays and Mondays. It's my music family. They took me in when I first moved to Minnesota.
So let's dig into that a little bit as far as music goes. What were some of your earliest influences of music, and how did that change? Did you like me? Did you kind of hit this point where things changed for you and your leanings towards music? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I grew up in a really religious foster home, so we weren't allowed to listen to the radio, no secular music.
Okay.
And so, I just, the only music I ever heard was church music, and the only, music in the house was church music on Sunday mornings. So,
did you sing in the church choir?
Yes, I did. I mean, I was in the choir very early. I discovered I had a gift thanks to Miss Western in 3rd grade.
Yeah.
And, so I became kind of a soloist in the choir as a young kid. I was kind of like that dude. But I loved my church, Mount Carmel Missionary Baptist Church in Waterloo, Iowa, because there was just like so many amazing singers, like really diverse group of singers, like some of the best singers I've ever heard, And so it was just a really good environment to grow up in, learn how to sing. And I think the thing that I was most moved about early on was just singers who were invested in what they were doing. There was meaning behind what they were singing. They weren't singing to show off. There was a true connection. And while, again, I'll say I'm not a Christian, I think that there was something spiritual about singing and connecting to the subject matter. And so that was the thing that moved me and kind of shaped me as a singer. I got into choir, in grade school and junior high, and oddly enough, that kind of started to shape some of my sensibilities in terms of the way I learned music, the way I thought about music. And
singing in an ensemble is just so much different than singing by yourself, and really not singing to out-sing everybody around you, but to blend in.
Well, my church was antithetical to that, because
was it?
Even though they were a group, it was just kind of bizarre. One of my favorite things was Christmas morning when we the choir would sing Silent Night. And again, you had all these amazing, there were things that I really loved about my church choir, and there were things that just drove me crazy. And one of the things that I really loved that also drove me crazy was the fact that there were so many soloists and nobody was adhering to necessarily what, but there was all these beautiful people with their own inflections. But I kind of got into secular music in my late teens, early 20s. I moved to Atlanta, and I started working in bars and stuff, so I had to learn music and put bands together and that sort of thing. And I started to get into fusion and the Yellow Jackets and Spyro Gyro and all that stuff, and then I really got into Weather Report, and that became one of my favorite bands. I just love Jocko. I'm a big Jocko fan, but Stevie Wonder is my favorite artist. I just seem to relate to Stevie. One day I just spent pretty much the entire day just listening to every Stevie Wonder album in my cousin's place when I moved to Minneapolis, and I was like, man, there's just so much here. I'm in love with Stevie Wonder. I just think he's just a gift. But, I love soul music. I love rock music. I moved here, pretty much to do a rock band called Black Julius with Michael Bland, who was a drummer with the Combo. And so that band was managed by Prince and Paisley. And so I like soul music, but I like all the applications of it, because that's why Greasy Meal is my favorite band, because there's jazz elements, there's rock elements, there's just straight R&B soul elements. I think it's all in there, and that's one thing I like about music, is that you can really toy with the elements.
And for me, growing up, music was a healing thing. I mean, I had a kind of a crazy childhood, and, a lot of people had a crazy childhood, but my sisters and I would listen to music. We'd throw on albums of different artists, and, from Pete Frampton to Stevie Wonder to Janis Joplin to, you name them, we would put them on. It would be a very healing thing for me to listen to music. And quick, funny music story for you. 3rd grade, they discovered I could sing. I mean, and I was a good singer. I wouldn't say I was great, but I was good, and I was decent. I could, I was on pitch and everything. And at the time, you're gonna love this one. At the time, the song "You Light Up My Life"
was
a popular song.
Sing it, Sean.
Light up my life. It was that one.
I love that song.
But I mean, imagine this third grade boy with the super high voice.
Is adorable.
And I practiced with our little 3rd grade choir, and I did the solo. And then they wanted me to do it in front of the entire school. And I called in sick. My mom was like, "If you don't feel comfortable with doing this in front of the whole school,
I get it."
I called in sick.
I get it.
I chickened out.
I'll never forget my first solo, but the idea that you're doing it in front of the entire school does change things a little bit. Let's just say
it was frightening. But the cool thing is, and one of the rare moments with my father where I felt like I had a little bit of a bond with him, where he recognized something I was doing, was with music. That he knew that I liked music, and I'd certainly heard the Beatles at that point, and some of that was played in my home, but my uncle had given the entire family the complete Beatles collection. And my dad said, "I want you to listen to these albums with headphones on. Listen for every instrument, listen to the lyrics." And I didn't just do it once. I did it over and over and over again. I just thought it was so cool that my dad recognized that I love music, and it became a real therapeutic, healing thing for me. I later got into all the alternative stuff, mostly because that's what the girls were listening to. And whatever they were listening to, I wanted to listen to. That's exactly what it was. Very convenient. And got into all that stuff, and the bands like U2, but I still fall on things like Stevie Wonder and things like that.
I completely subscribe to the idea that music is therapeutic. I just think there's just no doubt about it. You can't say to someone, "Do you like music?" because you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't like music in some incarnation. But I just think it's a really helpful tool to get us to the happy place.
And I think playing it, I mean, I'm a hack guitar player, I always have been, but in my home, I'll play my guitar and sing, and it's just, it's a peaceful thing. But I went to see, I had a friend call me up last minute, went to see a guy named Willie Niles and then a guy named Willie Porter play at the Dakota, and happened to have front row seats for that. And I was overcome. I mean, literally one of those things with Willie Porter when he was playing, and with the female vocalist that was there, the harmonies, the guitar playing, I was overcome. I mean, it really was such an emotional, amazing experience to listen to these people that I really hadn't heard. I'd heard like 1 or 2 songs of theirs, but there's nothing better to me than finding an artist like that and just being blown away and overcome with emotion. I mean, to me, music is very much part of my spirituality, and has gotten me through a lot of tough times.
Well, one of my favorite things, again, about the whole Greasy Meal experience was just the feeling that everybody was in a community where they were emotionally invested in that moment. And it can be an amazing thing when people just feel there's something spiritual about that, where everybody you can tell is being touched on some level, and they're involved in that way. I just think music is a helpful way to help us be one.
So when you're in a crowd listening to music, is there part of you that, I mean, you're watching a band, is there part of you that wishes you were up on stage performing, or can you separate the two?
I've been there before. I don't ever have that thing anymore, but I remember being a young cat and like, man, if I could get up there, I'd tear it up. But anymore, it's like, I've done all right for myself, so I don't really have that urge. don't mind it, but it's not something that I go. I'm not trying to get up in somebody else's mix and do that. I got my own mix to get up in. But for me, music is I just feel free. You feel like there are no limits. You feel like you can be all that you are. At least I feel that way. I shouldn't say you. I feel like when I'm playing music, when I'm singing, when I'm performing, it's just the truest. I feel most self-actualized.
I totally agree. I did actually get a chance to play in a band for a little while and do some charity gigs. I just did another one this last fall, and even though I was
a lot of secrets. You're doing the slow unpack with me. I like it.
I'm totally doing the Minnesota slow unpack.
I like it.
But even though I was playing other people's music, which is I know it's different, it was still really cool.
Okay, listen. A lot of people get hung up on that whole thing, whether it's somebody else's music or your music. Just play music. Just experience music. And yes, there's something amazing about making your own footprints and that whole thing, but I just refuse to diminish playing other people's music because that's how we all do it.
It's just so cool being on stage, from that side of it, and singing a song for me, because that's what I did, was lead vocals, and singing a song and looking out at the crowd and people that are just totally into it. And you're thinking, if I can give those people just an ounce of the feeling that I have when I'm on the other side of it, there's nothing better.
I think the truest thing you can do in those moments, at least on the truest thing that I feel like I can do for those people, is to be as much about me and less about a persona in those moments. It's just as true as I can to how I'm feeling this feeling, so that so there's real clear communication, at least emotionally, about what's happening. I just think there's no posing. There's just truth.
And I love it when the crowd's into it, too, which is, there's nothing better than that. When the crowd's feeling it, people kind of have this humility that happens. They're not as worried about what everybody around them is thinking or feeling. They just kind of move to the music.
It's the best time ever.
Nothing better than that. So this has been the Julius Collins and Sean Barnard Show. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/JuiceandSeanB. We also have a Twitter handle that is @JuiceandSeanB. The website, believe it or not, is www, as if anybody has to say that anymore, juiceandseanb.com. Please subscribe to the show. Share the show. That's the way we grow this thing. If you have comments, questions, concerns, sarcastic remarks, tweet us, direct message us, whatever you want to do. If you'd love to call into the show at some point, tweet us your phone number, and we will set that up with you to be able to voice your opinion on the show, whether you agree or disagree. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to some of that interaction with people here eventually. I have to say, I have received a few tweets related to the show, and one of my favorite criticisms of us, I must say, is while I may not agree with everything you guys say, at least you approach these things level-headedly. I am grateful for that analysis, because we will obviously never agree on everything, but I'm hoping that we can agree to be civil, and we can agree to try to respect everybody's position on things.
Yeah, I agree. And I had somebody say, I'd love to have somebody with an opposing view on the show. And I agree with that, as long as it doesn't become an argument, because I don't want to make it personal. I would rather, although politics is personal to me, and anybody who says it isn't paying attention, but I would like to get somebody on here with some other opinions, as long as they can back them up.
Yeah, there's a lot of bro love going on here, but I got no issues with bro love. But it'll be nice to have another person in to kind of like attack.
Absolutely.
No, I'm kidding.
We'll get a sister conservative. That's what we'll do. We'll get them, and we'll go from there.
No, but listen, we're going to be talking about a variety of things, and so it's just always good to have a wide range of opinions.
Absolutely.
I'm hearing my favorite song.
Such a great song.
Saturn by Stephen Morris.
For Julius Collins, I'm Sean Barnard. This has been the Juice and Sean B, the Julius Collins and Sean Barnard Show. Thanks for listening.